By the way, just because you brought up headphones for the kids, we actually got an email about this from Pasco. Hello, homeowners. Your discussion of noise-canceling headphones and hearing aids on the last HOA brought to mind this recent article from the BBC. Are noise-canceling headphones to blame for young people's hearing problems? There's been a pronounced and significant, quotes around those words, increase in the number of referrals for young people with audio processing disorder, a condition where a person's hearing is perfectly normal, but their ability to distinguish and discern background noise from the conversation they are currently having is diminished. Preliminary findings suggest a significant correlation between the rise in APD and the increased use of noise-canceling headphones by teenagers. Obviously, correlation is not causation, but this would hardly be the first time a new technology has been released into the mass market without any significant research being done on its long-term health or societal impacts. Fuck capitalism and practice active listening. Pasco.
Well, that would not shock me if that was true, given that when my mom kept putting off getting hearing aids, and increasingly it's like, Mom, when I call you and I can tell you're watching TV, it's because you have it up to like 3/4 of what the TV will spit out. Like, it sounds booming because that's the only way that you can hear it, and that is not a normal volume. So finally I walked her through to getting hearing aids, because also she was having trouble when we go to a wedding or out to a restaurant or something. Like, yeah, this is something you just got to get, even though you feel like it's not impacting your day-to-day life. Like, it is impacting your day-to-day life. You've just gotten used to not hearing things and then moved on with your life. And she got the hearing aids, found it very overwhelming at first because she had just essentially tuned out spectrums of her hearing noises that became like a sensory overload. And part of the reason her doctor, along with my pestering, was like, you need to get these, is that eventually your brain just decides, well, we don't hear those noises anymore. Goodbye. We're done. Like, I haven't heard those in a while. So the idea of active listening is also part of your brain. Like, your brain adapts in the same way that, like, with my like tinnitus and stuff, it's like part of the reason you just deal with it, as opposed to like stressing about like ways to mitigate it. Is a lot of people have told me that if you just live with it long enough, your brain can adapt and sort of tune it out. It just kind of gets used to what was there and goes on. And so it would not shock me if the proliferation of noise-canceling headphones amongst, I mean, pretty much any like AirPod or AirPod-like device these days is going to have some low-level version of that. That if you're using that all the time, like, of course your brain is going to adapt to that in some way.
Yeah, especially if your brain is developing. Like, I think that's because noise canceling is kind of it's really cool how it works, but it is still using how like a mature brain like perceives and processes sound and noise, and it uses a lot of tricks to make it to blot out unwanted noise. But yeah, I don't know what impact that has on someone who their brain is still kind of cooking and working on like how it processes stuff. But yeah, like
so these ones I have, I don't like the ones I get for my kids are
they're
like,
just low volume. They're just volume.
It's like it's capping the decibel of what it can output as opposed to noise canceling. I maybe those Bose ones I was looking at had noise canceling. I don't think I feel like noise canceling is introduced when you are at best in middle school, when like you have like music preferences maybe at that point. But the problem is, as these technologies proliferate and expand, they also get cheaper. They just end up working their way down. Like, it would not shock me if, I was like spending $25 on noise capping headphones for my kids, that once you get into the Bose or like a slightly nicer brand, well, why wouldn't you toss in like a little low-level noise canceling? And I don't know where developed brain runs into issues with like technologies that are modifying audio sensory stuff. Like, I mean, I run into this in a little bit. I plan to write about this over at Crossplay at some point, but like I got an email recently and it made me want to scream. So my daughter has access to when the Stadia came out, I got a Pixel phone, and it was to demonstrate how you can use Stadia, the old game streaming service, on different platforms. Got shoved in a drawer after Stadia went under, and I never touched it. When at a certain point, she just prefers she was running around with her iPad, like around the block, taking pictures and videos with it. And I was like, okay. And I tried to buy like a little digital camera. It never took. She never remember it. I was like, I have this little phone. It doesn't have a SIM card. When I load that up, I'll put the Google family controls on it, and then you can take pictures with it, which is primarily what she uses it for. And I got an email from Google that was like, hey, pretty soon in the next, they said near future. I don't know like how near, what near means. Maybe they're testing the waters to see how people react to it. It was like, we're going to be rolling out Gemini to children for them to use. And I've already had conversations with my daughter where one trick that kids use when they are using any device is when they're chatting, they don't write in the prompt, like the message boxes. They use dictation. So they'll just sit there and they're going back and forth with their friend, dictate, and that stuff is pretty damn accurate. Like it is awfully good at picking up on the majority of what you want to say. And I'll catch my daughter. I'm like, that you are in third grade. You are still learning to read and write. It's okay if you use like an autocorrect where like you're trying to type a word but you don't know how to spell it, and like I think that's fair. Like, but I can go in and turn off the dictation stuff, and I will. Like, I'll leave it there because it's okay to use it sometimes, but you should be using this as opportunities to like practice your reading and writing when you're messaging on there with friends. And she seemed to take that to heart, and I've noticed that generally she has followed that advice. But when I saw that Gemini stuff, I'm like, I know that AI stuff is going to be everywhere when my kids are like slightly older, but the idea that it was like, here's a friendly email targeting. Like, by the way, we're giving your kids the ability to skip all sorts of reading comprehension at incredibly young ages. I mean, it made me want to fucking scream.
Oh, yeah. It's weird. Like, I had a conversation with a family member while I was out in Indiana where they were sort of arguing that, like, well, the AI stuff's pretty good because, like, it does a pretty good job writing papers. You know, and I was like, but the point is that if you're talking like, yeah, it's not hard to plagiarize a paper or fake it. Like, the whole point is that you have to be able to write the paper. And it's this weird, like, and like, this person was coming from the standpoint of, like, I know they're educated, they care about stuff like that, but they just didn't see the contradiction between, this is how you get educated. It isn't you pass the course, you get through the grade, and then you like have the knowledge. Wrestling with the various forms of working with that knowledge, that's the whole point. If you are faking that, you're wasting everybody's fucking time.
Yes.
And you're just going to be faking it down the road. And at some point, I don't know, maybe like, and maybe the whole thing is like everyone's just sort of giving up the ghost, and it's just like, look, I want my kid to occupy some sort of safe, meaningless lower middle class perch, doing bullshit work assisted by AI, and it's not too hard, and that's it. If that's the height of ambition, one, I think AI was not going to leave you the safe perches anywhere, but. And it's a pretty sad vision, right? Like I think, you know, yeah, AI is going to help your meaningless job. You're just going to be able to now show up and not do it and have AI do it, and then you'll fuck off. But even beyond that, it was like this notion of, you don't see the problem that you're going to have tons of people who are being sort of trained to get to the part where it's like, well, you have to show you've learned something and you understand what you've like taken in and you've like done some analysis, and your first step is to be like, I'm gonna fake that, because it's not. I think this is a weird sense. It's the way AI people are marketing it, I think, very effectively, where no, it's just a tool that's gonna help you. Not really, especially if you're starting from like blank slate of paper, and it is not going to. It's not
hard
going to
on
give you any
purpose.
skill.
Like the first draft of anything sucks ass. Difficult to get the words out, to put them in order, to understand what you want to say. That's called writing. That's called comprehension. Like, whether the essay is any good or whatever, like the work is, like the end product is often it's the journey to the end product more than the end product is often the useful building block towards the future. And like, that's what spooked me so much about just plopping. Like, look, do I think it's the end of the world if, like, my daughter's like, I want a picture of a penguin to draw that I could print out. Could you make one? Like, no, that does not rise to like the level of like apocalypse on. But it's all small steps in the road towards just removing
It's not the
friction and
worst.
creativity.
Those like Adobe ads where it was like, it's going to unlock your child's creativity. I want a fairy princess who's a frog and a jet plane. And it's like, wow, Adobe can create that. And it's like, yeah, it's not the worst thing. A kid like plays around with a fucking like
Sure.
smart Etch-a-Sketch, cool, whatever. But also, it's kind of bleak too. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like, it's less. There is no output that Adobe's fucking image creator stuff is going to put out that's going to have the meaning or interest of like you give a kid a pile of like markers or crayons and like turn them loose and see what they want to do with that. It's just not like it's, yeah, you can feed things like the notion of like, oh, my kid asked me to do something, so I fed some prompts into a machine. A little bleak. My kid wanted to create something for me, and she fed prompts into a machine, and it neither really feels great, you know?
No, and it feels like I'm sure everyone's heard the stories of, folks graduating college, of like recent generations, and then to go to work at jobs, and if they aren't working on like an iPad or something, and they're forced to, work with a file structure, they don't know what any of that means because file structures have been eliminated from so many of the entry-level devices like Chromebooks, which just operate like those are just fancy.
Figuring out how files work on my iPad is like a fucking detective novel.
It's a nightmare if you understand how file structures work and you just want to access files. But like that sort of they don't understand the basics of computing because the UIs have been developed to obfuscate all that, and there are certain benefits from that. It makes computing more accessible to people. It makes it feel less dangerous. The trade-off is like when forced to work with any of the underlying architecture, they don't know how to do it. And I see a lot of worries in the same way of like, sure, like I want to print out like a princess bunny. Here's a prompt, like, and I go print it out of the family printer. Not a big deal. But like once you start getting like you skip the step of like, well, like could I have drawn the bunny? Like there's just all sorts of steps that get skipped along the way that I think introduce similar sorts of, you just didn't do A through C. You just started at D. And you're like, what do you mean A through C?
Who wouldn't rather have their child learn to go on Etsy and find a world's greatest dad mug rather than like creating a shitty one that their art teacher puts in a kiln? Like, but that's kind of what is. You have to go like learn to do some of this basic stuff, and yeah, this notion of that everything is just sort of built around like you're going to be a consumer of stuff, and we're going to pretend that we can turn you loose in a workforce, and your consumer tools are just, you can still just be a consumer in that space too. It's like, no, like you're actually going to have to do stuff here. Like that is it's pretty grim. And I think there's a lot of like defeatism about like the notion that it's perfectly fine for someone to just like turn to this stuff as their first recourse, like whenever you don't know how to do something. And step one is not like, how do I do it? Step one is do it for me.
Yes.
I would be less pessimistic if like AI were better at like, and I think there are some like things that are pretty good at like highlighting and finding answers to stuff, and I could see that being like eventually like maybe there's a better search, but it also seems to be premised on like destroying the internet that creates those results anyway. So I don't know, but yeah, like things that help people learn to do things, awesome, but like things that just kind of like do things shittily, and we're all just supposed to be like, well, it's good enough, really, right? Like how much better do you want for that? Including for things where it's literally the whole point is for you to do something, is grim.
Can I reveal something profoundly embarrassing? So haven't spent a lot of time interacting with AI chatbots and things of that nature. Like even just like ethical qualms aside, like I just haven't found ways that it even makes sense to like augment my work. It just doesn't seem particularly useful for many of the things I do in my day-to-day life. And so I'm just not that experienced with what they're capable of. And they've added ChatGPT integration to like all the Apple devices. I will say every once in a while I do ask ChatGPT for an answer because Siri is just a profound failure of a technology. And it's like, what time is the basketball game tonight? Siri can't tell me. Siri, could you ask ChatGPT, ask that for like, and that'll get me an actual answer. Anyway, one of the recent trips that I was on for Remap, I was doing expenses, and I got tired of like typing it into like the calculator app because there were just so many. I was like, I wonder, like, can I just like ask it? I was like, I guess, is that like a thing I could use AI for? Like, I just like, all right, so I like downloaded the Mac app, like opened it up, and I was like, add up all these numbers. And I did. And I was like, okay, that seems about right. But I've never done this before. I'm going to double check it. And so I add everything up like in the calculator app, and it's off by about 3 cents. I might double check it, go back and forth. I tried this like 3 or 4 different times. And then I finally like did like research. I was like, is ChatGPT like bad at math? And the response was like, it doesn't have a math model. It's a language model. So what it's doing is guessing what it thinks the numbers are. And it can get within spitting distance of what it is, but it's not actually right. And maybe that is profoundly obvious to everybody else, but I just assumed this like $1 trillion computing like technology, I could ask it to add up 14 numbers and it would do it. And I was told that it doesn't know how to. And I just wanted to whip my computer at the fucking wall.
Incredible. I've heard the jokes, that like we did it. We finally created a computer that's bad at math. But like literally not being able to add up 14 items in arithmetic, basic arithmetic, is pretty dire. That is some sad shit.
It just never occurred to me that, like, I know it's I know that's in the name, but I just figured you could add up 14 numbers. Like, we haven't added that to the option, to the suite. I'm not paying for anything. It was whatever the free option was. So my one time that I was like, maybe I could find some use for this. No, turns out not. Turns out I should just add it up the old-fashioned way. It was profoundly goofy discovery.
So turning to conversations of home life and hearth and home, and
sure,
maybe not turning to AI companions to enrich our lives, but maybe other things.
Yeah. So some months back, we finally said goodbye to our longtime dog Pixel. Feisty would be a kind way of describing her behavior in her waning years.